Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, we discuss the question, when should a fungicide application be done based on field conditions, pests, or other factors? What conditions will allow you to harvest early this year? And Dylan has a post-harvest wheat update with some yield results.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Lynn, and Dylan. And Ben, you're going to start off with some things that you've been getting calls on this week.
Yeah, so we've had quite a few customers call in and, kind of want some second opinions, third opinions on when to pull the trigger on fungicide, which is kind of a delicate and a hard answer. And it all kind of depends on what the preference of the grower is and what the field history has. So walking through a couple different scenarios on what I would recommend. As we know, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, tar spot. We can throw up the map on where all the counties where tar spot's been confirmed and the dates that it gets confirmed in. If tar spot is present in the field currently or has been up to this point, I'm going ahead and I'm pulling the trigger on making a fungicide application. And it's probably going to be an application that has the 2 or 3 modes of action with the longer residuals, so the more expensive fungicides, not necessarily some of the generics at this point in time in the year.
And the incubation time for tar spot's about 2 weeks, is that right, Ben?
Yep, it's 14 days.
14 days. So in other words, you may not see it now, but it could be there, and 14 days later it's going to be...
It's going to be there at an exponential rate.
Yeah.
So if you're seeing the spots, plan on seeing a heck of a lot more spots 14 days from now. That's one of the reasons why if you've had fields with tar spot histories and the weather is correct, which means a little bit cooler condition, lots of dew, humidity, fog, things that we've been seeing here lately, and rainfall, intermittent rainfall mixed in with that. That's the breeding ground for tar spot, and to be quite honest, a lot of diseases that we're looking out for, which is like gray leaf spot, northern cordonleaf blight.
And southern rust, right?
Well, typically southern rust is more of a wind-blown thing. It's not as weather dependent. It really actually survives really well in hot, humid conditions. But common rust can be one of those ones that would follow the same cooler, long periods of wetness. So tar spot's the one. If you have gray leaf spot or common rust or northern cordonleaf blight and it's in its early infancy period and you've had field histories with tar spot, I'd be scouting those fields awfully hard to see if, and I'm talking like not walking the outside 2 rows of the field, I'm out in the middle of the field doing my best to see if I can find even 1 or 2 tar spot pieces, because it seems like tar spot by itself isn't a big deal, but tar spot in conjunction with other funguses can be a big deal. And that's why I'm pulling the trigger at first tassel or at VT. And just so everybody knows what VT is, it begins 9 to 10 weeks after emergence. Corn enters critical period where successful pollination is required to convert potential kernels into viable developing kernels. The plant has reached full size, tassels are fully visible, and silks will emerge in 2 to 3 days. Pollen shed begins and continues for 1 to 2 weeks. So the goal is to be in that 1 week time frame. Hopefully Mother Nature cooperates. So that is the scenarios at which I would pull the trigger prior to the VT application. And also if you were wanting to get, and around, I know there's a bunch of different stages in the people that listen to our podcast, but a lot of corn around here is already at that point. So if you're in those conditions or your corn's not staging that far because you didn't get planted quite as early, that would be the conditions that I would pull the trigger on earlier. If the field is pin dropped clean and you haven't had the right conditions, like the weather that we were talking about, and you had tar spot that may have showed up super late and the inoculum load isn't near as high, I'm really waiting for that brown silk time frame. And brown silk time frame can probably be classified as R2. So if we go through what R1 is silking. Silk is one of the most critical stages in development for yield potential for an individual plant when its silks are visible. For the field to be in the R1 stage, the average silking date is used. The average silking date is when 50% of the plants have started to silk. Pollination begins at the base and proceeds towards the tip. Potassium uptake is complete and nitrogen and phosphorus uptake is occurring rapidly. Physiological maturity can be estimated by adding 50 to 55 days to this silking date. So that is what R1 is. R2 is 12 days after silking, silks darken and dry out. Kernels are white and form a small blister containing clear fluid. Each kernel develops an embryo. Kernels contain 85% moisture. Stress, typically drought, at this stage can reduce yield potential, causing kernel abortion. So those are the 3 stages. So when we're at that R2 blister stage is when we're technically considered what I would call brown silk. And if you've been really clean up to this point and you make it through pollination and you're trying to decide, because that's where we're going to be at here in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. If you're really clean, this is where I like to make the recommendation of spraying a fungicide at that brown silk time frame, because what you've gained is 2 weeks of protection later on into the season, hopefully reducing stress, keeping 30 days of protection so that no extra infections from tar spot, gray leaf spot, northern corn leaf blight, common rust, southern rust. You're protecting yourself for 30 days from that period. So those are kind of my recommendations. A lot of the fields have been really, really clean. So a lot of guys are really holding off, but some of the guys that have been nervous about tar spot or have had tar spot and seen some of the detrimental effects of it have already pulled the trigger on their fungicides, because the helicopters and the planes and the drones and the high boys are all going crazy right now. So that's kind of my, I hope I covered that thoroughly enough, but I mean, that's kind of what my thought process has been. And really the only way that you can determine this is by being out in the field and knowing field history and knowing when certain diseases set in.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, the reason why, I guess when you're talking about delaying that, so we know, like with tar spot, like it is going to have that bell curve that it happens. So essentially what we're trying to do is delay that bell curve to the height of that bell curve to the furthest point on the backside of the maturity, so that way we're not inhibiting yield on that. So when we get into that R2, we are hoping that top of that bell curve is hopefully right at physiological maturity, hopeful. Now when you're early, we run the risk of pushing that. We push it back a couple weeks, but we could still be ahead of that physiological maturity. So if you sprayed at that VT time frame, it's going to be really diligent to come back and look and see in a 2-3 week time frame if you need a second application at that point in time to make sure that we're not causing undue stress on that plant before we hit black layer.
Ben, I've heard this said this spring from one of the retailers. He said, farmer came into him and said, I don't know if I want to spray fungicide, I don't want to put more money into this crop. The price of corn's not that great. What do you say to a farmer like that, particularly when we look out at the corn right now, at least in this local area in Southeast Iowa, it could be best yet, as far as stands and overall uniformity. What would be your advice to a farmer that says, I don't know if I want to spend more money on this crop because the price of grains is not that great?
Leaves a lot of that mentality as a mentality. It's a justified mentality, because I get it. I mean, all 4 of us sitting at this table spend money on growing crops out of our own personal checkbooks, and it leaves a lot of risk. So if I'm in that mentality, I'm spending a lot of time scouting those fields, because until you have experienced some of the losses, sometimes the most well-remembered lessons in life are the hardest lessons. So you might get lucky, you might skirt through not having some of these huge detrimental yield losses, but there are so many things that can affect the price of grain politically that we don't know yet. So
that's right.
A decision that does not pay off quite as fast at $3.80 corn may pay off really fast at $5 corn. And I'm not saying we're going to $5 corn or $12 soybeans. I mean, we can all wish and hope and pray, but we can only control the things we can control. And right now, it's a time to control the protection and some of the yield potential that's out there. I would rather market more bushels for less than market less bushels for less if that time comes.
Yeah, I think to your point in that, especially locally, if anyone's in that bucket, we have the inoculum, we know that. we've had the experience to a small degree, but as Joe has mentioned before, the guys out, the part that scares me is the guys that experienced that back when it came in June and 21, 22, whenever that first kind of came around, and 40, 60 bushel yield hit, plus down corn, just all of these things that compound that. Are you comfortable being in that position? If you are, that's the risk you're taking. Now, if you're not comfortable being that, it potentially could be an insurance policy, I guess, to making sure that you don't have a situation that arises to that. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those that it's really hard. I understand coming from the finance background, at some point, the checkbook just has to go in your pocket and you're done. But at the same token, man, it'd be really hard to not leave any bushel on the table right now. And yeah, even if it's 10 bushel, we were talking to somebody yesterday. It's kind of one of those, like you said, darn if you do, darn if you don't. But this is a scenario that I guess I kind of say is what if I'm right? What if I'm right? What if you don't go and protect that? Are you willing to leave that on the table? Are you willing to go through down corn? Obviously we have had really good experiences with fungicide application, late season plant health with the Merschman corn. That makes me a little bit more confident, but at the end of the day, we have other things that are working on. Like I said previously, gray really hasn't been that big of an issue. Starting to see it. We could have compounding effects. Maybe we turn off hot and dry and this doesn't come out, but if we do experience conditions that are conducive to grain fill, we could have conditions that are exclusive to fungicide being very efficacious, for lack of better terms, when it comes to that. So it's tough. We've contemplated that, I think, since probably Thursday in conversations. But to me, the biggest thing, we all go back to the highest yield the corn is when it's in the bags. Everything that we do from here on out is yield preservation, and it's just really hard to go out there and see 18 by 42, 20 by 40 kernels around out there and not preserve that.
It's a tough call.
Yeah, I understand. I wouldn't want to be in that position, but I know in our business, just from the standpoint of running our business, when we had that tough decision, we said we don't know if we should or we shouldn't. We do half, and we say, well, we're either half right or half wrong. Yep. So you can do that too, and that way, if you made the right decision, you feel pretty good about the half that you did, and if you made the wrong decision, we feel pretty good about the half you didn't spray. So that's another way to. That's just something that my dad taught us, is do half and then learn from that and then reset for the next year.
Right.
Last one I've had related to that, guys are asking, throw insecticide in or not. That's been a few questions that's going off. Here locally, it's probably a mixed bag of the guys that go ahead and throw it in. You were talking to a retailer, it says he sees a lot of synergy that comes out of that mix. From a pest standpoint, seeing some Japanese beetles, some silk clippers on some outside rows. You get it into the field. Just haven't seen them kind of do that. And the risk with the Japanese beetles, as far as spending the money and spraying on it, is, especially if they're on the outside edge, the adults can jump out, go hide out in the neighbors, and then a couple days later jump back in, and then you've really not done anything efficacious as far as that application. So that's another one. There's no silver bullet when it comes to that. Obviously there's some synergies there, but if you're not seeing the pest, it doesn't necessarily justify the application at that point, if you're wanting to kind of save a few pennies when it comes to that application. But you saw some westerns down at your place the other day, so they're out there. The pests are probably out there. Bugs are really, the bugs are hard, because when you're built like Ben and I, they probably hear you coming from about 7 or 8 rows away when that corn's, you can probably sneak up on them a little bit easier.
So it's like hunting for bean leaf beetles. They crawl down those cracks pretty fast in soybeans.
Yep. So yeah, when the corn is soying and I'm huffing and puffing, they probably have a fair advance notice of coming in. But that's another one. Do what you think makes best for your business decisions there. Going after adult rootworm beetles, if you have them, is not a bad management technique if you can get them taken care of. But as with everything, we have prudence when it comes to applications of things. If you don't need it, probably don't need to spray it, because there are some beneficial bugs that are out there right now.
Yep. I think that was Tuesday. I saw my first 2 beetles, and I'm specifically trying about every other day to get in through our corn fields, just to keep an eye on when our timing is going to be for pulling the trigger on making sure we get those knocked back down. Interesting facts here coming from University of Illinois, from an older article that they had. Days between or days after silking for these different stages. It's 12 days to get to blister. It's 20 days from silking to get to milk. It's 26 days to get to dough. 38 days to get to dent. So things move along very, very quickly. And then that double fungicide application that guys talk about, by putting a late, milk stage, dough stage, to add an extra 30 days worth of protection, is going from that 38 days to 60 days to get you to black layer. So it's that fill period, which is so important on certain varieties, and knowing which varieties you have. And we'll talk about this once we're getting into that time frame a little bit more in depth, but knowing if your products are super deep kernel products versus high kernel count products. Those are the products like our 2411 is a very, very deep kernel. It doesn't put on a lot of length. That would be a product that a late season application is more apt to see a response from, versus our 2413, which is a high kernel count, shallower kernel, but has a lot of density in that kernel. So things to be thinking about as we continue to progress here, and guys are questioning 1 fungicide, 2 fungicide, when fungicide. There's just a lot of things to think about and decisions to make here over the next 30 days.
So interesting date. We talked about this before, or yesterday on the way up as well, but this reconfirms it. If we had 50 days to today's date, we will have corn at physiological maturity on August 29th.
And that makes sense, because about 10 days ago we would have started silking or VT time frame. So
which is going to be...
So where will that put harvest at then?
The way that August has gone and September has gone, the guys on the prairie were probably going to be going the same time the guys in the bay. So that could put us, for the ones that are concerned about phantom yield loss, like to go in, 25, 23%. I mean, it very well could be the week after Labor Day, rodeo weekend. Could see some combines rolling, definitely the weekend after that, which is actually really good from a personal standpoint. I love drying 23% corn when the outside temp's 80 or 90 degrees, because the efficacy that dryer has. I mean, I think last year we used half the amount of gas with way more bushels and way more drying as far as the percentage goes. But when that dryer, especially in the overnight, if we could stay, 60, 70 degrees, it just the machine runs a heck of a lot easier when you're not fighting the outside temp as much. So that's good. That means we're going to have some good opportunity to get the crop out and get some field work done. And the most important, getting with your seed advisor and getting your seed ordered at a very good time. So we'll expect everyone to have their orders in by October 1st.
So the takeaway is maybe you got to get that combine out a couple weeks earlier this year if you planted some early April corn. Yeah,
and chit-chatting about it last night on our personal acres, it was probably here in the next week making a phone call and make sure that thing is on the list at the implement to get through and try to get stuff once over. So we're going to be there the month, especially when it comes from personal lives. I'm speaking of this, but for everyone, the month of August seems like it's one that gets away from us in a hurry. And if we're going to have the growing degree units that were predicted, that August 29th could be August 27th in some guys' instances, or even earlier. So don't let the month of August slip away from you. Don't let the month of July slip away from you too.
That's no kidding. We got wheat totals in, didn't we?
Yeah, we had we finally finished up wheat harvest from north to south. Everyone from local in West Point down to Tennessee, next to our Rough Diamond location, and wheat did extremely well this year. All the growers were ecstatic about. They come across the scales and they were all guessing 100, and then we give them their final totals, and everyone was all happy about it. We had a lot of guys raise 120 plus bushel wheat for the first time ever, which is awesome. Over just a little over 1,100 seed production acres, we average as a company 94 bushel per acre. A majority, all but 2 growers, that's across the scale. So that's all in our plant in West Point. So I mean, we're going to have a lot of wheat to sell and to put in the ground come this fall. And we grew. Our Peyton did fantastic. It did 96 over 306 acres. Our Millie 8 they're both hyper earlies. They did Millie did 106 on 305 acres, and test weights were phenomenal. Yeah, this year Maddie did 102. That was over more acres too, just under 400. And they fought some weather down there too, which is.
So to put a little bit of a point on that, the majority of our Maddie acres were raised in areas that received lots of rainfall. Yep. So in southern Illinois and in Tennessee. So the fact that they were raising 100 bushel an acre, they were absolutely floored. Test weights were a little bit lighter, but that doesn't really affect yield in the range that they're in. So, not yield, germ is the word I was looking for there. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and then the new Julie 12, that'll be up for this fall, did 98 over 125 acres. And then a new spec production Barbie 16, it did a little lower, but it still did very well for what type of ground it was in. It was in a little back hill kind of field that just didn't seem like it should even be in production, but that's how it goes too. That's what it seems like. Wheat gets put on maybe the more marginal acres, but after looking at these yields, look what marginal acres can do.
You know what I farm, right?
Yeah.
You just described what I farmed.
Yep.
Well, Dylan, you actually had a Millie variety and the Peyton variety. Both, you had individual growers in both cases at north of 130, correct?
Yep.
Average for their entire field, north of 130. I actually heard somebody say, wheat's yielding so good, I think I might put it into a rotation.
I wonder who that was. Yeah,
it was Dylan.
Yeah, so we're taking a look at it we see these the past 2 years. I know it's been favorable conditions, but if we can continue to grow 100 bushel wheat, and some of the like the Millie, it's really good on straw. We can take the straw off and get double crop. It really makes you look at it to put in production for next year.
Yeah, I mean, part of our targeted, audience was moving that double crop line north, but I think some of that, and talking with an individual doing relay cropping, why this wheat or wheat in general has been more favorable and I'm not saying climate change or anything like that, but we have seen, we're still getting our average rainfalls, but we have larger rain events, maybe a little bit early, and that's a really good situation when it comes to wheat. And we're able to, in this relay crop situation, he's kind of able to, stabilize the soil and torrential rainfall. The wheat's able to actually use that, and then kind of helps the beans stay a little bit more, quote unquote, in the game without that. But as we have some of this, if we're going to be wetter in the spring, and you need to do some management as far as trying to spread out your risk a little bit, throwing out 100 bushel wheat, and still if you can get near $5, that's still a pretty good deal if you can turn around and follow that with 30, 40 bushel double crop.
Yeah, and I know we got the comment too. I know a lot of growers, as they were coming across the scales, they're like, "Oh, we thought this would be maybe a little earlier. We're pushing the hyper early term." But you go and you look back on spring.
The month of May in particular.
Yeah, we did not get the growing degree days that we needed to keep going and with green up and just keep pushing through the.
And then we got delays too because we kept getting those showers and we couldn't get the wheat off. I mean, the wheat. If it had stayed dry, would have came off at least a week earlier than what it actually ended up. And then again, that's where you go back to having access to a bin that you can throw air in, and then you don't pay attention to the weather. You just cut it when it's the right moisture and throw it in a bin and for a few days, and then you protect it to test weight and maintain the yield. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's back to why we're a little bit delayed because of that, but part of the reason you're seeing those numbers like that are because of that. We had good rainfall, we had good, cooler conditions when it came to the fill period on wheat. So the caveat there is that we maybe gave up a little bit on the early harvest, but it was put to good use.
Yep.
So in some of these farms, wouldn't raise 60 bushel. I mean, some of these guys that got close to 100 or over 100 wouldn't raise 60 bushel first crop soybeans just because there's sand, lack of moisture. So we had one 20-acre field do 104. We had 120 acres do 101 on sand. We had 90 acres do 94 on sand. We keep sliding through some of these. We had an 86 on sand. There's another 94. There's an 87. So I mean, that's good bushels for. It's good use for the ground that's marginal.
Yep, absolutely.
Good. I'm glad the farmers had another good wheat year. Back in the day, before we had all the fungicides and scab tolerant varieties and all the disease resistance, used to be say that you can never have a good wheat crop and a good corn crop the same year. If you had a good wheat crop, you usually didn't have a good corn crop because it meant it was dry. And if we had a good corn crop, it meant it was wet, so you didn't have a good wheat crop. Now we're getting good wheat crops despite the weather. And right now, we'll knock on wood, we just keep our fingers crossed, and we could have a good corn crop too this year.
And one thing to mention as well is this is when, this doesn't always happen, but this is when a plan comes together, because I was within 5,000 bushel of my goal because I was banking on 90 bushel per acre wheat, because the yields have gone up, like what you were talking about a couple minutes ago. They have gone up that much. I mean, a 90 to 100 bushel wheat crop is not out of question. I think within a couple years, if the varieties keep moving as fast as they're moving, you know, it's going to be 100 bushel plus is the old 60 bushel mark.
Yeah, and if you apply management to it, you know, we're invest in that crop a little bit, you know, 130 is where some of these guys are at now. So, and then the ironic thing is a couple of those 100 bushel yields that we had were stands that were questioned in the spring. They said, boy, my stand is awful thin. What do you think I ought to do? But they stayed with it, put the nitrogen on, got the things to tiller, and still made 100 bushel. So wheat's tough. It's got 9 lives.
Yep. We're going to be completely honest. One of them you're talking about, I got shown the picture, and I called Avery and Dylan. I was tied up. I'm like, you need to go look at that field right now, because it just didn't look like the drill had great seed to soil contact, maybe some residue issues, and it was at that point in time where it was like, you got to make the decision to call an audible, and it kind of worked out. I think that the rain came in and
he couldn't determine it. Yeah.
And yeah, we've joked about it. You go out and look at a field, looks like it's got 90 bushel potential. Do 90 bushels. Go out and look at a field. I just remember one
early on in the wheat's life cycle.
Yeah, three or 4 years ago, we looked at one down in Missouri, and it was like kind of the same boat. Like, once you get a chance, go out there and go plant beans. Weather didn't cooperate. Get a phone call. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't listen to you and went 90 bushel. So, yeah, and I think that's back to the improved genetics, the ability to manage through that with nitrogen applications in the spring, being timely in that, getting some really good tiller counts, and maybe having some varieties that have maybe don't carry as much weight with that main head. Some of the tiller heads are carrying more than that's statistically been the case in previous varieties. So, yeah. Wheat is no longer just a cover crop or poverty grass.
And the other thing too is, that's why more and more farmers are starting to plant in 15-inch rows and making that work too, because these wheats do tiller and do expand and utilize it, and so you don't have to have all this specialized equipment. Wheat's a great crop. From my selfish perspective, I like wheat because there's no tech agreements and there's no grower point of sale reporting. In other words, it's pretty simple compared to the traded material that we sell in corn and soybeans. Well, if that's all we have this week, I've got a couple stories, okay? Now, Dylan, I'm not picking on you, okay, because I know you're not this person, but this story did have a Dylan named in it, so it must be your evil twin, okay? All
Spelled different.
Here we go. An exasperated mother whose son was always getting into mischief finally asked him, "How do you expect to get into heaven?" The boy thought it over and said, "Well, I'll run in and out, keep slamming the door until St. Peter says, 'For heaven's sake, Dylan, come in or stay out.'" Okay? That's your plan, Dylan. Okay? One last thing. Okay, we all heard the Chicken Little story, right? Okay, teachers talking to the kids about the Chicken Little story, about the skies falling, okay? One day, the first grade teacher was reading the story of Chicken Little to her class. She came to the part of the story where the Chicken Little tried to warn the farmer. She read, "So Chicken Little went to the farmer and said, 'The sky is falling, the sky is falling.'" The teacher paused, then asked the class, "And what do you think the farmer said?" One little girl raised her hand and said, "I think he said, 'Holy crap, a talking chicken.'" The teacher was unable to teach for the next 10 minutes. Farmers are always looking for that opportunity, right? Anyhow, thanks for watching this week. We hope your family is healthy and safe, and we'll see you next week. Take care.